World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Now for the spec that I struggled with the most, or possibly that I realized I was struggling with the most. Affliction doesn't have a lot of abilities in their rotation in the first place. And Shadowbolt, the basic filler spell, is being replaced in the talent grid, which really makes things tough for me. Filler spells like that are often some of the first things I look at to create upgrades for. And it's my policy not to create upgrades for abilities that are being replaced in the talent grids. So I really had to look long and hard, and I'm not sure I came up with a good spread in the end. I will let Affliction players be the judge of that and dive right in. The first upgrade is Inhale Life, an upgrade for Drain Life that deals damage over time to multiple enemies. However, it doesn't heal you for nearly as much unless there are a lot of enemies. It is channeled and it has no cooldown. The second upgrade is Void Throws. It is an upgrade for Agony that has a 1.5 second cast time. It immediately starts the Agony debuff off at its full damage. Third, we have Corruptive Shadow, an upgrade for Corruption, and that is a passive. You no longer have the ability to cast Corruption on targets directly. Instead, any target hit with your Shadowbolt or Inhale Life abilities receives the Corruption debuff. Fourth, we have Nether Conduit, an upgrade for Malefic Rapture that is channeled. It consumes 1 soul shard per second, and each time it does, it deals increasing shadow damage to all targets that have your damage over time effects on them. Fifth, we have Seed of Darkness, an upgrade for Seed of Corruption. It is guaranteed to explode after 3 seconds or the death of the target. It deals more multi-target damage than Seed of Corruption, but instead of directly spreading corruption, instead it spreads whatever debuffs happen to be on the target at the time of the explosion. Sixth, we have Summon Inquisitor, which is an upgrade for Summon Dark Glare. It has the same cooldown and same effect of prolonging your damage over time effects, but it deals area damage instead of single target damage. Finally, we have Demonic Breath, an upgrade for Shadow Fury that blasts targets in front of you away and slows them by 50%. Now we get to the thinking. Affliction was a tough spec to create upgrades for. They just don't have that many buttons to upgrade. I figure I had to have made some mistakes at some point, but if I knew what those mistakes were, I wouldn't have made them in the first place. So I need help from players to sort this out. Demonic Breath I copied from Destruction. It's a utility upgrade, and I usually have at least one of those for every spec. I had wanted to import Chain Darkness from Destruction, which is probably going to be a joke in and of itself, but then I saw that there was a thing called Drain Soul that already replaces Shadowbolt in the talent grid. Talk about a brain fart. My policy for the moment is to not upgrade abilities that are already being replaced by talents. I should have checked them first. So I looked for another ability to upgrade, and look what I found. Drain Life. Inhale Life is meant to be a multi-target rotational filler spell, by the by, since Affliction didn't seem to have one of those before. If this is the wrong way to put such a spell on Affliction's spellbar, please do let me know. In the course of creating these upgrades, I have made changes like unpruning older abilities or sometimes even adding new abilities outright. If that is what is called for here, I will do it again. Affliction's only source of shards seems to be random ticks of agony and killing targets with unstable affliction, and the only spender is Malefic Rapture, and I didn't want to upset the apple cart too much by providing too many new sources of shards. I wasn't sure about Corruptive Shadow. Affliction already has very few buttons, and this actually removes one. But it also removes a global cooldown, and with Inhale Life, you can apply the debuff to multiple targets much more quickly. Though this does make me wonder about just how much synergy these upgrades have with each other. I mean, you can only equip 3 of them at a time, so limiting players' options too much by requiring them to have 2 of these upgrades equipped at a time for them to work, that's not something I'd want to do. Feedback would be appreciated here. Another option here would be a spell that simply applies the Corruption debuff to multiple targets. Sure, Seed of Corruption does that now, but it seems, I don't know, clunky from reading how it works? Maybe I'm getting the wrong impression about Seed of Corruption just by looking at its description on Icy Veins. Even if I'm getting the right impression, maybe I'm picking the wrong way to address it. It's stuff like this that keeps me humble and keeps me knowing that I need player feedback to make sure that any of this would actually be good for the game. And it's saying things like that that remind you that no, I am not a Blizzard employee. If I were, I wouldn't admit to any mistakes. I'm virtue signaling so much about humility in this video series because I know that humility is a very, very good thing for Blizzard to have, and I'm crossing my fingers that some inkling of that will reach the minds at Blizzard. But enough about that. Back to iteration number 1's upgrade spread. Nether Conduit is intended to be a different kind of trade-off, more burst and less sustain. It encourages you to let your shards build up to the maximum you can hold and then spend them all on one single huge channel. If this is too tough to set up, or wouldn't mesh well with other abilities, then I will gladly discard, replace, or alter this ability, whether it's capping the shards it can spend at 3 or whatever else needs to be done with it. Please let me know. Seed of Darkness was... oh boy. For a while, I had it set up so that it no longer spread corruption at all. It just did AoE damage and lots of it. Then I realized that doesn't work with Affliction's kit at all. Affliction's one shard spender is designed to damage targets with damage over time effects on them, and not spreading damage over time effects is, it's working against the spec's design. I'm not proud of how long it took me to recognize that, but at least I changed it before I released the first iteration. Now the question of when you cast it depends on how many debuffs you can throw out first. At least I think it is. Feedback would definitely be appreciated on this one, and indeed on the whole thing. Inquisitor is intended to be another trade-off, multi-target burst damage instead of single target. I guess it makes sense lore-wise, since plenty of demons would be unemployed after Sargeras' binding and the Titan Argus' destruction. So working for Azerothian adventurers who go out and kill a lot of things at least gives these Inquisitors some souls to consume. Void Throws... it was me running out of ideas. The only abilities I hadn't yet upgraded were Agony and Unstable Affliction, and I figured allowing a Warlock to have a little less ramp-up time at the cost of a hard cast instead of an instant might be a good trade-off. If it would be better to have something that applies Agony to multiple targets at once instead, let me know and I'll do that. Though I have to admit, I don't want every one of the upgrades I have to be it does the same thing as the original spell but to multiple targets. That would just wreck the variety the upgrades are supposed to be providing. It's okay for a few of them to be a trade-off of single target for multi-target, but all of them? That's a bit much. Again, I'm hoping these trade-offs are, at least situationally, worth it. There was little along the lines of multi-target damage present in Affliction's kit when I looked at it on Icy Veins, so plenty of these were built with multi-target damage in mind. If I picked the wrong trade-offs, if I implemented them badly, If I should have added an ability or two to Affliction, or if anything else just rubs you the wrong way about what I've done here or how I've done it, please do let me know. I want to turn this into something good. I want it to be something that gets players excited so that whenever the dust settles with Team 2 at Blizzard, they will look at this and they will see what's necessary to get players excited and to make them want to come back and play World of Warcraft. And I know I have to have made some mistakes at some point along the line, so please point them out so I can understand how to make this good in Iteration 2. I felt the need to insert a little something here that I only realized after the fact, after I had recorded everything and I was about to assemble the actual Affliction Warlock video. Neither Corruptive Shadow nor Void Throws could possibly work. To my shame, I didn't pay enough attention to the abilities themselves, nor to the talent grid. If I'd been paying attention, I'd have seen that Corruption had a small amount of upfront damage for Affliction, so turning the whole thing into a passive, I'm not sure that really makes sense when it takes away that initial damage. Then again, you have the initial damage of whatever spell you're casting anyway, so what do I really know? I'll throw another feedback please on this one because honestly, feels like there are just too many problems with Corruptive Shadow for it to work. You can spread it to a bunch of targets instantly with Inhale Life, but that takes up 2 slots, and that alone rubs me the wrong way, but layer the loss of the initial damage on top of that, and... ugh. Just ugh. And then there's the Creeping Death talent. The Void Throws upgrade totally moots it, at least for Agony, so I don't think I can keep Void Throws around at all. At least not as a don't have to wait for it Agony upgrade. I mean, I could take the name and do something else with it, but as it is here, Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. You know, I keep adding these sections smack dab in the middle of each video where I go over the first iteration of upgrade spreads and evaluate how I did with each of them based on how useful they are for buffing single target throughput versus multi-target throughput. And considering how much I struggled with Affliction, I am dreading this part. I cannot skip it though. The fact is, when I was cooking up these spreads, the line of thinking that I had at the time was what abilities exist in the kits that I can upgrade, and how can I make them feel different, or look visually impressive, or make them more impactful? That might sound like it's intelligent enough, and there are questions very much worth asking in all of that. but a question I wasn't asking at the time, which I ask smack bad. Smack bad? I meant to type smack dab in the middle, but I think I'm going to keep that. So, smack bad in the middle of each video, I ask, if I were a player with the goal of optimizing my single target throughput, which upgrades can I pick? And I ask the same question for multi-target as well. It makes things awkward for the tank spec videos, to be sure, but for this one it makes sense. So now, it's time to virtue signal about humility some more. No, it's not. It's time to quit procrastinating and do the evaluation. Light, help me. Okay, single target. What helps? Well, Corruptive Shadow saves me a global cooldown. I guess that's something. Void Throws gets me higher DPS faster. That's it's definitely something. It basically means less waiting, but it's not necessarily more DPS per se. I mean, the longer the fight, the less of a DPS boost it is, and Nether Conduit can help if I'm okay with the burst versus sustain trade-off. So the upgrade spread isn't really useless, but there are trade-offs this forces you to make. I'm not sure how happy I am, or should be, with those trade-offs. I hope that actual Affliction Warlocks are looking at those and getting excited, but how much do I really know? And even if these are exciting, Corruptive Shadow is just one global cooldown. I'd like to think I can do better. I'd like to think Affliction Warlocks can do a lot better. So I'm open to feedback. Very open to feedback. As for multi-target, there's Inhale Life, Seed of Darkness, and a few options. Corruptive Shadow is one option. Summon Inquisitor is another. Heck, Nether Conduit is as good for burst for multi-target damage as it is for single target. That is 5 upgrades for multi-target damage, one of which is not impressive and more or less forces you to pick yet another upgrade so that they work together. Yes, indeed. I am very open to feedback. I want Iteration 2 to be good. I am hoping to the light that Affliction players have more and better ideas than I have had. I'm also hoping there's enough in this to show that the semi-borrowed power upgrade system can enable players to get new and exciting things, so players consider this to be worth salvaging. You know, I finally got an idea for how to make Malefic Rapture a more single-target flavored upgrade. It deals a bunch more damage, and that damage depends on which dots you have active. But it only affects your main target. It's a thought. It's a legit enough trade-off, I guess. But I still know that Affliction players will be miles ahead of whatever I can imagine. You know, at first while I was editing these, I'd thought that my Outlaw Rogue upgrade spread was the worst among my first iteration, but I'm starting to suspect that Affliction is the worst. I guess I'll only know if someone who's played both an Outlaw Rogue and an Affliction Warlock can look at both and tell me. And I'm going a little bit off script here, but a DPS Warrior as well. Those might just have Affliction beat. We shall see. In any case, I am definitely going to iterate in response to feedback on this. I think I've hit my quota for humility virtue signaling for this video. In fact, honestly, this whole video could count as one big cringe comedy humility virtue signal, so I'll just stop here and go into the ending spiel I have recorded for all these videos. Literally, in this script, I have 3 asterisks, the word ending spiel, and another 3 asterisks to demarcate the common ending narration. I think it suits me. Unfortunately for me, this is not quite over. Now, it was painful for me to write the script and painful to reread it. And some part of me is hoping that charitable players might tell me the problem is on the WoW developer side for designing Affliction the way they did. But even if that's true, I really could have paid more attention. With the knowledge that I can't upgrade Agony, or any other damage over time effects for that matter, and do damage faster with them, and the knowledge that Corruption has some initial damage, and the knowledge that my single target upgrades are basically kaput, I need to rethink things for Iteration 2. Some part of me wants to add a way for corruption to get on targets faster, but Seed of Corruption and its upgrade, Seed of Darkness, both get corruption onto multiple targets fairly quickly. Besides, what I need is more single-target upgrades. Some part of me wants to upgrade Unstable Affliction into some kind of burst damage tool on a cooldown that'll let players blast an enemy for fast damage. I mean, that would work really well with Seed of Corruption, since it would let you deal damage that you need to deal to detonate early, which actually makes a single-target burst damage ability sound like it's a multi-target upgrade rather than a single-target one. Strange thing to talk about when Seed of Darkness is one of the upgrades in the spread that I'm not talking about removing. Of course, I gotta watch out for that Rampant Affliction PvP talent. Maybe if that PvP talent turned it into a multi-target burst damage tool. Well, maybe. I'm not sure this is even a good idea. Some high damage ability on a 15-second cooldown sounds very un-Affliction-y, though it also seems like it might be a nice change at the same time. It's tempting to use the name Void Throws for it, but I feel like I need to give it a different name to differentiate it. Maybe Unstable Bolt? If this were the final product, I might use the Void Throws because that sounds cooler, but Unstable Bolt is at least recognizable and easier to discuss. I'm thinking it applies a debuff that lasts about as long as its cooldown, and if the target dies with that debuff, you get a Soul Shard. It would need to have more DPS than Unstable Affliction to be an upgrade, so I'm leaning in the direction of a 10-second cooldown, around 110% spell power, so it can just plain be a much-needed rotation shakeup. For a moment I was going to say it could detonate Seed of Corruption, but then I actually checked the numbers, and 2 Shadowbolts is enough to detonate a Seed of Corruption if you're in a hurry, so I should stop worrying about that. So that's the replacement for Void Throws taken care of, but now I'm wondering what to replace the Corruptive Shadow upgrade with. Well, first of all, there are very few abilities to work with. So let's go with upgrading Drain Life a second time, but in a different direction. This time, let's make it a brief channel that deals a chunk more damage and has a 15-second cooldown. Let's call it Deplete Life. And yes, I used thesaurus.com again. So now we've got 2 decent single-target upgrades, at least in theory. I'd need to hear from Affliction Warlock players to know if this idea for Iteration 2 is any good. Though, I'm halfway expecting that an Affliction player will easily come up with 7 upgrades way better than what I've come up with for Iteration 1 and 2. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in-depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done, and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.